All right, let's do a little almost internet famous weekly TechSpective happy hour. We've got Walter as our special guest once again. Walter loves a good happy hour. So let's cheers. Walter actually would love to love good happy hour, but no can do. No best damn cherry cola for Walter. So let's see, just a couple things this week. I want to talk a little bit about the ongoing kind of privacy and legal battles between tech companies in the United States. So, this week, Microsoft filed the lawsuit against the Department of Justice over the gag orders. Basically, intelligence agencies or the U.S. government currently is allowed to ask tech companies to surrender data on users and not tell anyone about it. They're ordered to comply and hand over the data, but they're not allowed to let the public know that they handed over the data. And the idea, I understand the idea. The idea is if you're chasing a terrorist, if you're chasing a child molester, whoever you're chasing, you as the intelligence agency or as law enforcement, you want to be able to access that data and conduct your investigation and gather that evidence without the individual's knowledge. You don't want to give the terrorist or the sex offender or whoever the opportunity to delete data or run and hide or whatever. So I get that. I don't think that trumps the Constitution, and I think Microsoft has a solid case for arguing that those types of orders possibly violate the Fourth Amendment, possibly violate the 14th Amendment. Yes, we want our intelligence agencies to do what they can to defend us against terrorism. And yes, we want law enforcement to do everything it can possibly do to prevent crime and capture criminals. But all of that is with the caveat of we want them to do everything they can do within the bounds of the law and within the framework of the Constitution. And, we can't... I don't agree. I know there's a lot of people who do agree. I don't agree that we give up those rights or we give up those civil liberties in the name of national security or in the name of, public safety even. The trade-off, I think, is too big. The threat from terrorism is not that big. The threat from... obviously, if you are the one killed, it's a big deal. If you're the direct family member of someone who's, killed or assaulted or whatever, it's a big deal. And you have an emotional, personal vested interest in that, and maybe that's different for you. But on the grand scheme of things, there are just so many things, so many things that are more dangerous, that are a bigger threat to you on a day-to-day basis. The odds of you personally being affected by a terrorist attack are ridiculously small. There's almost, I don't have the actual numbers, so I'm just making stuff up, but I believe your odds of getting killed in a hailstorm are probably higher. So it's just not that big a deal. It's not worth giving up our civil liberties for. So yes, I want the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and whoever else is doing intelligence stuff, I want them to do everything they can to gather intelligence and detect and prevent terrorist attacks and chase down terrorists and everything else. By all means, go for it. Within the bounds of the Constitution. That's not something I'm willing to trade off personally. So I hope Microsoft prevails. I'm confident, as I've written about, that had the FBI not suddenly backed out of its case, that Apple would have prevailed in its case against the FBI as well, because the government is on the wrong side of this. They're overstepping their authority. And funny side note, I'm not sure how much the information's been confirmed or corroborated, but I saw reports today that the FBI is now confirming that after all of that hubbub with Apple and the lawsuits and going to the hacker community to gain access to this iPhone, after all of that, there's nothing on it. I had already predicted that, because the terrorists from the San Bernardino shootings had gone through the trouble of destroying their personal iPhones and destroying their personal computer hard drives. They covered their tracks, so it didn't make any sense that there would, accidentally be some sort of, breadcrumb trail on their company iPhone, which was government issued, which they had every reason to believe would be government monitored. So that whole exercise was just dumb on behalf of the FBI. So that's that. Now let's talk a little bit about this Apple Car concept. It came up this week. Motor Trend it did a kind of a silly thing. Motor Trend did a what they called an exclusive look at what the Apple Car is going to be, and it was exclusive because they made it up. I mean, nobody else can have access to something they made up, and it was basically just some people at Motor Trend kind of having a brainstorm session of, well, based on what we know about Apple and based on what we know about cars, what might an Apple Car look like? What would Apple do? What features would we expect? They had some renderings, just artist renderings of what an Apple Car might look like. And Rob Enderle wrote on the site this week about the idea of an Apple Car and why Apple might be uniquely suited to take on Tesla and produce a car. Personally, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that's the market they're going to get in. Now, granted, I suppose, there's people who said that about, Apple's not getting into the phone business. Apple's not going to get into the, watch business or whatever. Apple's not, whatever. Apple tends to get into businesses that you don't expect them to, and they do an excellent job of redefining those businesses. I mean, Apple gets into markets and puts them on the map, and it's very frustrating for the people who were already doing it. It's very frustrating for the customers who were already using products from other companies, who are like, well, but I already have a phone, or but I already have a watch, because Apple jumps in and takes over the market and does it better, frankly. So it would be interesting to see what Apple would do with the car. I just think that's a huge leap. So, we can, rewind. You can point me back to this video in 2-3 years when Tim Cook announces the Apple Car and tell me how wrong I was. But even if they are working on some sort of a prototype or whatever, I could see it being more of a test bed. Like, Apple wants to play around with the technology side of the vehicles to understand better how it can incorporate itself and what products and services it can sell into that model. Although, I mean, if they wanted to do that, they could just go buy a Tesla and play around with that as a test bed. But it's just a whole different market. The overhead is different. The profit margin is different. Producing a car, producing an iPhone or an iPad in China and shipping it back to the United States, there's shipping fees, there's taxes involved. that's exponentially higher when you're talking about shipping vehicles. So if they did, as Rob suggested in his article, if Apple did leverage its position in China, leverage its relationships in China, and get involved in auto manufacturing in China, that would be a whole different thing to try to import vehicles. I mean obviously companies do it. I mean there's plenty of import vehicles, but it definitely cuts into your profit margin. So I don't know. I'm not exactly holding my breath waiting for an Apple car. I might very much like to throw my $1,000 down payment down on one of those Tesla Model 3s or whatever, but I'm not waiting for an Apple car. Walter makes happy hour difficult. So that's it really for this weekend. So I hope you have a good weekend, and we'll talk more next week. Feel free to send me an email, Tony@TechSpective.net. Let me know if there are any questions you've got that you'd like me to answer, or any specific topics you want to talk about. I am working on some guests and working on figuring out how to host and record a session with people other than myself and Walter. So anyway, that is all. Have a good weekend. Say goodbye, Walter.